Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Wellness 360 Friday night educational series. Today, you get a double whammy. You've been seeing me for the last couple of weeks, but now you get to meet my business partner, Lindsay Perez. Say hello, Lindsay.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. Out there in Facebook world. Excited to talk to you today.
Yeah, so I'm really excited that you all get a chance to see Lindsay and meet Lindsay, because Lindsay is really the one who brought the Rock Steady program to the Rochester area, as far as she is the founder of Rochester Rock Steady. So I'm really excited for you. Her whole life in the last couple years has been devoted to the Parkinson's community in the area. And because most of our business is based on the Parkinson's community, I thought it would be really important to do a little educational so we can bring awareness to Parkinson's in our area. So Lindsay, really quickly, tell us a little bit about the certifications that you have through the Parkinson's community.
Okay. This whole adventure for me started with getting my Rock Steady boxing certification. I flew out to Indianapolis 3, maybe 4 years ago now, and did that training with an awesome group of people. That was sort of my foray into working with people with Parkinson's. And that approach, the Rock Steady boxing approach, is a group exercise program focused on really high intensity boxing type drills. And we can get into, I can talk for hours about that program. We'll get into that later. And I just saw a need after running that program and doing these amazing group classes to add some one-on-one treatment as well. Nobody's created equal. Everybody's symptoms are different. So because of that, I pursued some physical therapy certifications, which allows me to treat people one-on-one and specialize in Parkinson's. And those are the LSVT Big training, which you also have, Beth. We have a double whammy in that. And that is a certification that really focuses on high amplitude training. So for folks whose movements have gotten small, gait has gotten slow, that's an ideal sort of treatment protocol for them. I also have the Parkinson's Wellness Recovery certification, which expands on the amplitude idea with big and focuses a lot on posture, core, transfers, steps, gait. So a couple of different certifications, some group focused and some individual treatment focused. So our program has both.
That's so awesome. I love the one part when Lindsay and I decided to bring our businesses together. I love the part because we're really passionate about full circle wellness, hence the name Wellness 360. So just the fact that we have broadened our outlook from group fitness classes and actually started with physical therapy, realizing people needed more help than what physical therapy was able to give them. So she developed these amazing group fitness classes, but then on the same breath, we saw the need that, again, like she said, that people are individuals. So
exactly.
So now you have
I think that term full circle says it all, that it needs to be both. And you need the option of sort of group maintenance type of exercise, but then every once in a while you need a personalized, really individualized tune-up. And that's what our Parkinson's Wellness program is all about.
So I think it's so awesome. And I'm so excited to go on this adventure with Lindsay. We've been working together for almost a year now. And we've really been developing all kinds of really great things for the Parkinson's community and for a lot of other communities, a lot of other diagnoses. Maybe Lindsay and I will come on and really just dive into what even Wellness 360 is all about here soon also.
That sounds great.
So let's talk a little bit about Parkinson's in general. So give us an overview for people that are maybe a new diagnosis to Parkinson's, or maybe are a relative of someone with Parkinson's, so they get a better understanding.
Okay. So currently there are close to 1 million people in America living with Parkinson's disease. So the prevalence rate is increasing pretty rapidly, which is not great news. although that does mean lots more focus on research and treatments because of the increasing prevalence. So there's a pretty good chance that you know someone that's been diagnosed with Parkinson's somewhere in your life. The biggest risk factor for being diagnosed is being over the age of 60, although 4% of the new cases of people being diagnosed are younger than the age of 50. So there is a wide range at which this illness can strike. It is a neurologic condition, meaning it starts in the brain. So a lot of people think of different movement patterns and motor symptoms when they think of Parkinson's, but it's primarily a disease of the brain. There's a region in the brain called the substantia nigra. It's right in the middle of your brain, and that's the part that's damaged. And I won't go into too much neuroanatomy because that gets boring and confusing, but there are cells in the brain that communicate with each other called neurons, and they communicate by chemicals called neurotransmitters. The substantia nigra is responsible for producing one of those neurotransmitters called dopamine. You'll be hearing that term quite a bit. So in people with Parkinson's, there's a decrease in the level of dopamine produced in the brain. And dopamine is responsible for a whole host of things in our body. It has a role in controlling how our body moves. It helps regulate things like the ability to feel happiness and pleasure, to pay attention and focus on things. It has a role in your motivation level. It can affect your mood. So these little chemicals that are produced in the brain and get bounced back and forth between the neurons are super important in all kinds of body functions. By the time someone is diagnosed with Parkinson's, they have lost at least, there's estimates up to 80%, but at least 50% of their dopamine production is reduced. So by the time these symptoms are super obvious, enough to be diagnosed clinically, your substantia nigra is already producing just a fraction of the dopamine it once was.
Yeah, that's kind of one thing that I've noticed talking to a lot of people in the research I've done is it sometimes takes a long time to diagnose.
Correct.
It's like there's a lot of testing and a lot of stages before the Parkinson's diagnosis. And the symptoms that happen in the very beginning are very subtle.
Yes. That's true. And a lot of times people will tell me it's a spouse or close family member that starts noticing these little changes, like strange little things that sometimes are hard to put together before they even notice. One of the most common early symptoms is a loss of smell. And another common early symptom is shoulder pain. But I think most of us, if we had a decrease in our sense of smell and shoulder pain, would never tie those two things together. You'd never think that was...
How many of us have shoulder pain? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's something that happens.
Yeah, diagnosis often takes quite a while, and usually an observant family member or friend to sort of spur that along, or a lot of times a primary care physician that's really paying attention at your yearly physical may pick up on some of those changes.
Yeah, that's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about the cause, because anytime that I've done any research, and I took the LSVT big class also and through my PT training, there isn't really a known cause.
Correct.
So do you have any other information for us?
Well, there is definitely a mystery surrounding the diagnosis of Parkinson's still, although there's tons of research being done in this area. The actual cause is largely unknown. You know, what causes that damage in that region in the brain we're not positive. There was a big study done in 2014 that proved that certain regions of the country have a higher incidence rate. And we also know that genetics count for 10 to 15% of Parkinson's. So that's a pretty small number.
Yeah.
So there are some regional differences and a teeny tiny genetic component. but mostly it's unknown. The theories are exposure to chemicals or pesticides, that if you have this gene mutation present, and you're exposed to these chemicals or pesticides or contaminants in groundwater, that may lead you to a Parkinson's diagnosis. We're all exposed to things like that. We're all exposed to processed foods unless we have an amazing clean diet. We're all exposed to pesticides and contaminants, but not everybody gets Parkinson's. So it's likely a combination of being predisposed through genetics and then being exposed to these chemicals in our environment.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about the side effects, the tremors, and the slow motion, the slow movements and things. Give us a little on that.
So to make a diagnosis of Parkinson's, neurologists will look for at least 2 of 4 main symptoms. There's 46 distinct symptoms in Parkinson's, but nobody has all of them. So I'll just touch on the 4 biggies, the most common. And the first one is tremor. That's when you have an involuntary shaking in either the hands, it can be in the jaw, it can be in the form of a little head bob or a tremor in the foot. It's usually on one side only at the beginning, and the tremor is worse at rest. Sometimes people can even stabilize it or make it go away when they use that affected area. So that's one biggie. The second one is rigidity, where your muscles contract. They feel like they're always contracted, and they don't actually relax or release. So you always have this sort of tension. A lot of times this is found in the upper body, but it can be anywhere. And it can progress to where the contractions are so strong they're actually moving parts of your body. And then the akinesia is the medical term for what you mentioned, Beth, the slowness of movement and the smallness of movement, where everything just becomes smaller. And this can be movements like your feet suddenly don't step as far, so you're shuffling with your gait.
Your hand rating becomes really small.
Yep. Voice can get really quiet. So those motor, the muscles in that help your vocal cords and help your speech get quiet and small. So that's common. One of the biggies is masked expression too. So the muscles in your face that make you super expressive and let everybody know what you're thinking are not as responsive. So you sort of have this mask, and it can be hard to tell what people are thinking. The last one is postural dysfunction. And this has to do with automaticity and attention. And that word automaticity comes up a lot in Parkinson's. And it means the ability to, our ability to do things automatically. Everyday things without thinking. So standing up straight is something that just happens automatically for all of us. Once we learn how to walk on 2 feet, our body naturally aligns straight up and down. People with Parkinson's have trouble with those automatic functions. So if they tend to end up in this forward rounded posture where they kind of stop fighting against gravity, basically.
Yeah, and that's one thing that we add in all of our programs is we do a lot of posture focus.
Yes.
Trying to build those muscles and bring back some of that biofeedback.
Yeah, for all of us, you know, if we spend a lot of time sitting in a chair or in front of a computer, our natural tendency is that forward curved posture. And it's not necessarily an issue of automaticity. Your body just sort of shortens and reacts to that constant forward pressure. So it is important.
Absolutely. So let's talk about progression of the disease. How quickly does it typically progress? I feel like it's different stages.
It's so hard to answer. We have people in our program in their 80s that are boxing all out, jumping, leaping, doing amazing things, and they've had Parkinson's for years. But some people will get the diagnosis and it will progress very rapidly. There really isn't a consistent, it varies widely person to person. People who are diagnosed younger tend to have a faster progression, but there's really no good answer. That's frustrating for a lot of people. You know, when you're diagnosed, you want to know what to plan for, what are things going to be like 10 years from now, but that's really hard to answer. And I think that's why it's so...
It's hard to answer for any of us, not just Parkinson's. None of us know where we're going to be in 10 years.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so important to do everything you can to manage the symptoms and slow the progression. There's no treatments right now that stop or halt the progression of Parkinson's, but there are things that slow symptom progression and make the symptoms a lot more manageable. So it's super important that you get diagnosed as early as possible so you can start those interventions as early as possible.
Yeah, which brings us to our next category, is talking about what can you do for it. And the good news is there's so much that we offer that you can do for Parkinson's to live a really long and healthy life.
Yeah, Parkinson's really responds to living a healthy lifestyle. So, you know, cleaning up your diet, which would actually benefit every single one of us. You know, whole foods, cutting out things that are processed is super important. So that's one thing you can do. Your doctor will most likely prescribe medications, and there's lots of Parkinson's medications. The biggie being carbidopa, levodopa, which the levodopa is converted to dopamine in your brain. So that makes perfect sense. Your brain isn't producing enough dopamine. You give it some medicine to help it, or to add more dopamine to the brain. So that's a biggie. That works well for a lot of people. There are a bunch of other medications that mimic dopamine or help prevent the dopamine you have from breaking down in the brain. So lots of medication combinations. The only negative with medications is that there's often a lot of side effects. And as your illness progresses, there's usually a lot of need, the medication effectiveness changes. That's what I'm trying to say. So there's, you know, medications are great and they're a good thing to help with Parkinson's, but lots of complications and side effects with that.
Yeah, and that's really frustrating, but I've definitely seen the miracles of these drugs, of people in our classes that have forgotten their medication or been late on their medication. So we're certainly supportive of the medication, but there's so many other things that you can do that are natural.
Yes, definitely, definitely. The medication has to be taken on a strict schedule. And we see that in our class all the time with people's alarms going off, and they should stop what they're doing and take that medication so they stay on that strict schedule.
It is kind of funny as you're boxing and all of a sudden you hear these birds chirping and all of these different alarms that people have, and they run across the room to grab their meds.
It's critical though to stay on that schedule. So that's, you know, the medication is super important and very effective and helpful. But outside of that, they're finding that exercise has a huge role in helping slow the progression of Parkinson's. It doesn't stop the disease, but all of these exercises can help overcome, especially if they're really specific to Parkinson's. It can help overcome some of that smallness, some of the posture dysfunction. We retrain a lot of those automatic movements so that they are automatic again. Exercise can even give you a little natural boost in dopamine. I don't know if anybody's familiar with the term runner's high, but after you go on a long run or do a hard workout, you get this boost of happy feeling. And that's dopamine and serotonin, two neurotransmitters that are naturally released and make you feel really good. So
yeah, absolutely. And the exercises that we do at Wellness 360, we really focus on that high intensity and that high exertion through the Parkinson spin and the rock steady boxing and some of the other programs that we have.
Yeah, that's a good reminder about high intensity too, because exercise will actually make positive changes in the brain. It will help create new pathways in the brain. That's called neuroplasticity. Your brain can actually grow and change just like muscles do. So when you strengthen a muscle, it gets bigger, it gets stronger, it gets more agile, it gets faster. Your brain responds to exercise as well, and new pathways are formed, stronger connections between those neurons are formed. So you can actually make physical changes in the brain with some exercise.
Yeah, and that brings me to another point, is there's a lot of studies happening now, and I was just reading some from Michael J. Fox that show about meditation and Tai Chi and some of those other things, because the meditation, which is kind of the portion I bring to Wellness 360, is the mindfulness of strengthening those neurons between cross brain hemispheres and decreasing the size of the amygdala and increasing the size of the frontal cortex, where there's a lot of executive function that happens, memory and things. So between the exercise and the mindfulness and the meditation, it's a great program.
Yeah, and I think anybody living with a chronic disease is going to experience some form of stress, and we all know the negative effects stress has on our body. So I think adding that mindfulness component is pretty crucial, and I wish more people would take advantage of that along with the physical exercise.
Well, actually, we're getting ready to launch, this week, next Tuesday, we're getting ready to launch a new series. And this mindfulness series actually is going to be incorporating some of the body, mind flowing exercises. So we'll be doing some more Tai Chi inspired exercises and yoga flows and different things along with our mindfulness lessons. So if anyone is a caregiver of someone with Parkinson's or has Parkinson's, this would be a really great program to start.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful for many of our Wellness 360 clients.
Yeah, I agree. We have a great group. So let's talk a little bit about, because both of us work in physical therapy and both of us we own Wellness 360. So how do people decide what's the difference and what's the best method for people with Parkinson's diagnosis?
Excellent question. And that's probably the most common question we get when people want to hear more about the Parkinson's Wellness Program. And the good news is they do not have to decide what they want to do. You don't have to come into our program and wonder, should I do group exercise or should I do one-on-one? Everybody who enters the Parkinson's Wellness Program has an initial evaluation with one of our Parkinson's specialized physical therapists. And based on that evaluation, we will write out the program for you. So some people start and do just one-on-one therapy. Some people go right into the group classes, and some people do a combination of both. And there's lots of factors that go into that. One of the biggest ones is with what ease you're able to do your daily tasks in life. So if getting things done around the house is a major problem, if falls are happening at home, that might be somebody I keep and work one-on-one with for a little bit. If you're pretty high functioning and just need some motivation and some guidance on the right type of exercise to do, you might be somebody that goes right into group classes. And then there's all stages in between where people might do a hybrid of the program.
Yeah, I can't stress the importance of this enough. Coming from a background, I was a personal trainer for a long time, and then I went to the field. I cannot stress the benefits of having two people working in physical therapy to be the leaders of your class, to be able to notice the differences and how you're functioning, and be able to time having the functional background of and knowledge about us, to be able to watch their classes being solved, because the whole purpose of your professional be more views, class smaller, so that we can be one-on-one with you. And having the physical therapy evaluation gives you measurable proof and measure things that you can measure your progression or your regression. So we're able to change your focus on you're progressing or regressing.
Yes, and we practice that all the time. I will pull people out of class, do reevaluations, and suggest, maybe they do a short bout of one-on-one treatment to address whatever's changed over the course of the Parkinson's. It happens all the time, and people are usually pretty responsive to that. I think the earlier we recognize those changes in symptoms, the better chance we have of reversing that. So it is.
If you're at class, you're not just getting your great boxing workout. We're constantly watching, and we're constantly having discussions like, hey, so-and-so seems to be, their steps seem to be smaller, or so-and-so seems to be having a harder time in this class. And we have different levels of classes, so that you're not coming into this high intensity, full out class when you might be on a place in your life where you need a little more one-on-one attention and a little slower movements.
Yeah, and I think it's important to remember too that as people, we're terrible at analyzing our own bodies and movement. It really takes an observer. Just like with the initial diagnosis, it's usually a family member or somebody that's noticing subtle changes before we notice them in ourselves. The same thing happens over time. It really helps to have an outside pair of eyes that's trained in looking at these different Parkinson's symptoms to kind of pick up on subtle progressions and changes.
Absolutely.
You may not even notice.
Yeah. So do you have anything else to talk about with the Parkinson's diagnosis you find important?
Just one last little note. We talk a lot about how exercise is super important, and high intensity exercise that is hard enough to make changes in the brain. By hard enough, I mean challenging enough. So some things that are new, and that can really be anything. We offer a high intensity cycling class. We offer boxing. Boxing is kind of our most popular program, but it's certainly not for everybody. This can be accomplished in our balance class. In our balance class, we do all kinds of agility work, which would give you the high intensity challenge you need. So I think it's important to remind people that there's a variety out there. And since you really need consistency and a long-term plan for exercise, pick something you like.
Yeah, there's no sense in struggling during things that you don't like. We have so many options between the spin classes and the boxing classes, the balance and agility classes, the strengthening classes. I mean, we have a class for everyone, and we have the chair yoga class for stress reduction. We have the mindfulness class. Now we're going to be doing kind of a combo, a hybrid of mindfulness and body motion class. So there's something out there, and because Lindsay and I are the ones that design and develop the classes, we're open to suggestion. If there's something that you really like, you just have to let us know, and we'll be able to do some research and somehow incorporate those in your classes.
Yeah, and too, they can bring their caregivers. We love having spouses come be in the class with you. So if you need a little extra encouragement or a little extra help with balance, we encourage care partners to participate too.
Absolutely. We've even seen neighbors and family members from afar, people coming from other states to come and visit and see what mom or dad is doing.
Yeah. Whatever system you have, bring it with you. That helps with consistency too.
Yeah, definitely. And at Wellness 360, you're not just a client, you're family. We definitely have created quite an amazing family that supports each other, is there for each other, and it's a beautiful thing.
I agree.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us. Remember, these are pre-recorded, but that does not mean we're not available to answer your questions. So drop your questions below, and I hope to see you again next week for our educational series on Friday night.